Chapter 33, Satellites Falling Out in Europe. Satellites falling out in Europe. Good. You know what? Fuck Cook. Fuck Neo-Buddha atop Sears Tower. Certain garbage is better off excluded from a movement. Not that the witch had any right to call it a movement. The world's most justified terrorist organization, all right. At the boat Darien and Roth had reached a truce. They both decided to accompany her.
The objective is simple. There will be no complications. Kill the cat. Kill Clown Muffle. Kill DuPage.
The witch didn't say that. Darien did. Solid atop a world of water, the colors swayed but she could not quiver. Roth hung her head and sat against the railing. Her shoes squeaked together. Her white cape crumpled.
Another thing, I lead this expedition. Berwin, you forswore your title. Paulus, you deserted. Your heads remain on your shoulders solely because I have no other heads to command. You will answer my orders, is this understood?
Where did, what? The witch had barely landed. She remained in the airborne world. She had to reconstruct Darien's impermeable words to parse her meaning.
I think. Did I ask you to think, soldier?
Lieutenant Bolingbroke resurrected from her decades-long death. That same bearing and lingo. The witch hesitated, despite the obvious impatience etched on Darien's brow. She had assumed she led this expedition, that the expedition was an extension of her own journey as a human being. In an ancient bedchamber, Hemet said,
"Humanity seeks power. We must root out that impulse."
"Our communal power," she said, "could overcome the power of the individual. Society is community, those who accumulate personal power are aberrations. Like Clown Muffle. Their ragtag society of three already had a deviant." The witch wanted to tilt her head and grin at the ghost of Hemet creeping back to unlife. At the ghost of Isabel Leva creeping out of the roadside snow in Ontario.
"Yes, sir,"
she said. And saluted. Darien frowned. She searched the witch's face. The witch knew why, to detect irony. But she would find none, not a milligram. Was she resorting to old tricks again? Compromising her identity and beliefs? No other interpretation arose.
"I,"
said Darien,
"am glad we reached an understanding so easily."
It was Roth who tightened and nearly shrieked as she flung herself across the deck and ripped at her hair.
How can you? How can you indulge her? I know why I did it, but you..."
Her head rolled from her shoulders and plunked the ground. Darien, who began her swing before her transformation even completed, held a gargantuan sword. Blood ran down its edge until it struck the hilt and dripped. Its long shadow plunged the deck in darkness.
"I shall not tolerate disobedience, Berwin."
Darien wore a wedding dress. Unblemished, white, ribcage constricted by 100 crisscross corset strings. The veil shrouded her face. Then she reversed her transformation with as much efficiency as she initiated it.
"Pick up your head."
Roth's body fell to its hands and knees and started fumbling. The head sobbed.
"I gave up everything, I just kept giving and giving, I only want what little I have left. Please." "You retain the option not to accompany us,"
said Darien,
"as I know neither Cook nor Kenosha shall. You may, as they will, save your pathetic life to eke whichever existence you may scrounge. It's you, Pepper, it's you, you're the only thing that still matters to me."
A clumsy hand struck the head and rolled it over.
As I explained to Berwin, any personal element to our relationship is terminated. She, and you, shall refer to me only as Centurion Darien. Yes. I am this empire's final centurion. Out of respect to those who existed before me, I'll appoint myself only the 5th centurion. How can you throw away everything? How can you act so cold? I taught you, I nurtured you, you can do this to me? So quickly, so easily.
Whenever these two talked, the witch stuck out as an obvious third wheel. She had hoped they would have at least resolved this kind of crap by now. But the moment she had that callous thought, she regretted it. Berwin finally found her head but struggled to orient it back on her body. Her eyes streamed tears despite the continued clarity of her speech. She was the ghost of Hemet grasping for the Murray that crawled out of that snow and left behind everything.
The truth is, said Darien, I never asked you to do anything for me. And despite all you taught me, all Lady Cicero taught me, I think I'm starting to see that my most important teacher was Clown Muffle, and that her most important lesson was that if I want this world to obey me, I have to make it. And to make it, I must eliminate all weakness in body and spirit. That's fake. Fake.
The head rolled between the shoulders.
You're telling yourself that because that's the only way you think you can beat her. Fake.
The boundaries of the entity Berwin bled into the deck and sky and lake, her colors mixed with theirs, her form deconstructed into basic elements. She melted only to reform.
I'm not a weakness. I helped you, I made you stronger. I know I did. Palos.
Darien swiveled with minimal movement.
I grow tired of wasting time on matters that should have already been settled. We have a long trip to Washington. On the way I will need to know everything about your abilities, its limitations, the limitations of your physical body. I need to possess enough knowledge to wield you as an extension of myself. If you are not an extension of me, you are worthless. Is this understood? Yes, sir.
This whole sham authority would fall apart in face of Clown Muffle.
Now we depart. Well. Miss Self-appointed 5th Centurion, soon to be Emperor, I presume? Well. That's all fine and all, but have you an actual plan?
Berwin eventually said after road-bound hours behind the wheel of a requisitioned four-wheel monstrosity. She spoke long after the car last fell silent, the witch beside her and Darien given the spacious back half for herself.
Insolence, I won't brook. Tactical advisement I'd consider a worthwhile point of discussion, milady? Or shall we rush in, headless and heedless, and trust our faith in ourselves shall earn the day? I am conceiving a plan.
She sat in the center seat, her legs outward, back stooped, hands pressed into a form of prayer to divide her eyes as they bored into the witch's forehead through the rearview mirror.
Conceiving, of course. Obviously the conception will require additional intelligence, which we can gain with Palos's radar once we reach Washington.
Berwin allowed her statement to simmer without comment until they reached the next junction. They needed to cut their way out of Chicago, but since then took byways to circumnavigate major cities. They brought a horde of grief cubes shored up with Riley over the past 4 months from the immeasurable tides of wraiths prowling the docks.
You may have stripped me of my rank, milady,
said Berwin,
but in life I was Lady Cicero's trusted confidant, even in tactical matters. It may be wise for our young centurion Darien to consult with me.
An aspirated, strained grumble passed between Darien's pressed lips.
Very well. But turning around is not advice I will listen to. To which I will listen, milady. Poor form to end on a preposition, I. If you intend to waste my time, I simply think it prudent to remind you that you still have much to learn. Nonetheless, I'd like to call to your attention that your stated goals for this expedition are too, how shall we say? Your scope is too wide, milady. How so? It is entirely superfluous to kill that clown muffle character. She is merely an enforcer. In fact, I'd argue it's superfluous to kill DuPage, or whatever she's become. The true menace is our old friend Lady Juliet, who manipulates the world via the airwaves. DuPage may have mired a single, albeit important, city, but Juliet's using her abilities to spread that despair worldwide.
No, said Darien.
No, says the lady. Methinks the lady doth protest too much. Your thinking is entirely rational,
said Darien.
The incubator would think the exact same way. Didn't he say as much? He conceived a plan that had an assured chance of killing Juliet, with DuPage considered a secondary objective. His plan failed.
Berwin's hands wrung the steering wheel.
An irrational plan does not assure success, whatever you may believe, my young lady. Juliet distorts people's perspectives,
said the witch. Why not chime in? Why not exist as more than cannon fodder?
People try to kill her all the time. They miss at the critical moment, even when it seems impossible. That's something in her wheelhouse of powers, at least as I understand them. Have you any way to deal with that pernicious snag, my young lady 5th Centurion and prospective new Emperor Darien?
A thick smile spread.
Simple, Berwin. I cut people to pieces even when I'm not aiming for them. As plenty of our former platoon mates and even you yourself experienced firsthand. Quite the reductive, specious resolution you've concocted, my young lady. Is specious a word you know the meaning of, apologies, of which you know the meaning? My fair lady.
Darien's silent glare answered the question. The strategic discussion progressed nowhere. Their vehicle progressed well enough, though. The despair that gripped the nation had manifested in quiet ways, in houses, in closets, not on the roads, which remained tidy if strewn with potholes. The witch barely spoke, Berwin and Darien spoke a lot. Their presence swelled and flattened her against the pane of her window. She compressed, tinier, insignificant. She thought and thought of some kind of strategy when they confronted Clown Muffle, even if only to say something, but her ideas were empty. On one hand, Darien's arguments, seemingly stupid, felt right. If the incubator had attempted to assassinate Juliet and depose DuPage, and failed even with more resources and a genius mind, how could their shitty gang hope to even leave a scratch by doing what he had done? But Berwin buoyantly tore down any proposed alternative. And the witch understood Berwin's logic. Berwin wanted no answer to exist. She wanted Darien to realize that. She wanted them to go home. They parked on the side of a deserted rural road and slept in their seats. Darien had argued for them to forego sleep. Didn't need it, she claimed. Berwin pooh-poohed her and threw her white cape over herself as a blanket as she snuggled in the driver's seat. The witch watched the stars. When Berwin's snoring became loud enough to exasperate, Darien's hand fell on the witch's shoulder. The witch turned, expecting some reprimand. Instead, Darien's hard gaze had softened. Her eyes looked askance at Berwin. She said,
"Hey."
"Hey," said the witch, after hesitation. What had once been solid now devolved into a collection of fidgets, not necessarily nervous, but with an idle, lazy kind of distraction. Darien's gaze kept shifting, her palms rubbed together and then against the seat.
"You were going to do this fight alone, right? Before you came to us?" "Yes." "And how exactly did you think you were going to win?" I don't know. You said you know her? Clown Muffle? You said you heard her. That's right, said the witch, I was Murietta Temecula. I was also Murietta Temecula. That's the thing though. She never seemed that strong. I don't understand, was she holding back her abilities?
The witch had nothing to say. The witch, like anyone else, could not claim to understand Clown Muffle. The twinge of folly returned and dispersed like an ebbing tide. If I may interject, said the incubator. Darien and the witch searched for him, their heads turned all over, they found him in the cup holder. His red eyes gleamed, but otherwise he became a nocturnal blue. I did not want to mention this while Miss Roth was awake, but...
I thought you were too busy to talk to us for long, said Darien.
Let's just say this venture of yours continues to advance on my list of priorities. As I was saying, I do believe there is a reason for Miss Viscera's unusual increase in power. I've observed her a long time, and while she has always been a powerful magical girl who has mastered her body and abilities, she has never struck me as someone of abnormal power.
I thought so. I thought so.
Darien nodded like a bobblehead.
I knew it. We only lost because of Cook. Cook destroyed us. If I hadn't gotten stuck in that ice.
No. Truthfully, Miss Jefferson should have been able to defeat Miss Viscera alone. I would also have wagered that Miss Cabwee could have. While Miss Viscera matched them both in terms of raw power, the addition of Miss Luce's invulnerability magic should have given them a clear edge, as it did in previous fights against even stronger opponents.
She just has some kind of, I don't know, protection, said the witch. It's like she can never die. It's like luck.
Under normal circumstances, I would consider that hypothesis ridiculous. But upon reconsideration I believe it may be true. I think the karmic importance of Miss Viscera has increased an immense amount due to the intervention of God.
God,
said Darien.
God,
said the witch. Correct. You may meet an emissary of hers soon, but that's beside the point. I'll simply say that at one point, Miss Viscera was meant to have died. But God herself, acting as the law of the cycles, intervened. That action changed the course of history. As such, one might say that this entire timeline exists in its current state solely because of Miss Viscera. If that's true, then it means the karmic weight of the entire universe rests on her shoulders. In effect, this would cause her power to increase exponentially. Darien and the witch exchanged a dubious glance.
So does that mean she can't die? Or what?
Said Darien. I don't know. The only other entities I can say with certainty were revived by a divine act were already divine themselves. This circumstance has never occurred before, at least in this timeline. This is part of why I'm willing to take a poorly calculated risk on this venture. The driver's seat rustled, Berwin turned over. They waited a long moment before continuing.
But you also offer no solutions,
said Darien. I'm sorry. However, there is someone you may meet in Washington who may, in fact, know more than I do. I've attempted to communicate with her myself, but she's quite stubborn. She refuses to pay any attention to me.
And her name?
Sayaka Miki.
Who is she? What does she look like? What are her abilities?
While Darien probed about this Sayaka Miki figure, the witch started to zone out. The truth was, for a long time now, she had nurtured an idea about how to beat Clown Muffle. The answer to Darien's previous question, of how she planned to win by herself, but something she refused to speak aloud. Communication. It seemed obvious. If Clown Muffle could never die, then simply convince her to change sides. It had to be possible. She was not omnicidal. Maybe she didn't realize what the cat's broadcasts did to the world, maybe President DuPage's malefic aura tainted her somehow. Maybe Joliet had rewired her, although she didn't exactly know why Joliet, the sniveling coward who rode on the back of her broom when the sea beast attacked, wanted the world to burn either. No matter the reason, it seemed such a clear and tantalizing option to simply persuade Clown Muffle. As simple and clear as Berwyn's assassination plan. As obviously flawed. When? The witch had to face it. When had she ever convinced anyone of anything? When had she ever persuaded anyone? Who had ever listened to her? Clown Muffle never did, nor Denver, nor the Magnet community, nor Cook. She had always fancied herself a budding revolutionary.
Gonna change the world,
she thought to herself as she planned her uprising with Hemet. But she wasn't. She didn't tell people things. People told her things. Hemet, Bolingbroke, Hedgewish, now Darien. And Darien herself was a receptacle for other people's visions. What appeals emotional, logical, ethical could she employ? What authority? And if she tried and failed, what instead might Clown Muffle convince her to do? Just as she had in that roadside snow. Just as she had in Ottawa. Darien morphed back into a girl the same age as the witch. She interrogated Cube, but nothing he said eased her mind. She distrusted him, she distrusted God, she distrusted everything but herself, and everything had done everything in its power to shake that trust. This would never come to pass. They would turn back before they even reached Washington. Except they reached Washington. Berwyn drove them the entire way, at times with a paper map plastered against the windshield as she discerned bizarre alternate routes. She did not seem to notice Darien's increased restlessness, the constant wobbly motion that accompanied a maintained sense of authority. She loosed passive-aggressive jabs whenever possible, but she never turned the car around, never slowed or brought things to a confrontational head. They reached Washington. It had changed. Everyone knew the city, its pictures flooded every textbook, an inescapable symbol of Americana with more notable landmarks per capita than cities millennia older. A city, one might learn, built by slaves, financed by slavery, and even in its latter years breaking the backs of the souls that financed its insatiable churning machine. They made it far into the suburbs before they reached the edge of utter blackness, the vortex that swallowed the ground. And while wraiths grouped in thick bunches and on multiple instances they stopped the car for Darien to dispatch them before proceeding, the preceding array of sad hovel houses did not diverge from the world they all knew. Then they reached the precipice of hell and it yawned back at them a toothy gape. They stopped the car and stepped out and regarded from the last few feet of unblemished road. In their world it remained day, a murky frigid sunless day but overcast rather than truly dark, in there a perpetual night, eclipsed by an unseen disk that spotted only this small region of the earth. Inside lights danced. Inside flowed a stream of vehicles. They had stopped on a side alley because the streets in the suburbs had grown so congested. When they climbed onto a rooftop for better vantage, they could see every major road that fed into the city clogged. News vans, limousines, sports cars, busted jalopies, every sort of pilgrim flooded inward, and it was only the light and color of their forms that provided much substance to the world inside. Black shapes, spires, and pillars, rose, indistinct, to form a skyline or backdrop. Power outage city, a city divorced from all light, yet a city with its own stars around which patterns of blue swirled. And the power's out. In the heart of man.
That's it,
said Darien.
I expected worse.
The few reports I received from the team I sent indicated it's much stranger on the inside than the outside, said the incubator on Darien's shoulder, a defective model, with its head connected to its neck by only a strip of flesh and a wriggling wire of spine, as though someone had unsuccessfully geeked it. The rest of its body retained its typical comportment. Please be wary. And don't enter yet, or you'll assuredly die.
Cheery,
said Berwin.
Hell itself. How far we've come as a civilization. Tisk, tisk. Palos, your radar. How many Puella Magi inside?
The witch dreaded this question. As soon as they neared, she knew the answer. Her radar could not read this world. It was not simply an absence of magical signatures, even though she knew at this distance she should have detected at least Joliet and Clown Muffle, a rigid, unbending wall extended at the exact point where the street became a black hole. Her radar bounced off its edifice.
I don't know. I can't read it. There's a magical girl about a mile north, though, on the rim too.
Plus a couple others bouncing around the general vicinity, but the one on the rim seemed most relevant. That would be Miss Mickey. I highly recommend you speak with her.
Miss Mickey,
said Berwin.
An angel,
said Darien,
according to him. Oh, delightful. Angels now. And here I thought I'd had my fill of religion with all the Empress stuffed inside me. I've just recently finished spewing it all out, now they've brought me a live specimen to devour. I don't care for your poetical phrasing,
said Darien.
You care for my nothing. The tragedy of our times. But alas, why should Her Munificence Darien X worry herself with the psyches of her peasants?
They went to speak to Miss Mickey, the ostensible angel. They found her in a tent, the kind you might camp in, set up on the sidewalk and making use of a patch of decorative dirt to stick some of the stakes. If anyone expected any ceremony, they must have been disappointed, because through the open tent flap they saw her warming her hands around a campfire, looking hobo chic in the trendiest Goodwill fashions. Half her hair had compressed into a shiny solid clump attached to the side of her head. She had blue hair for some reason. She stirred a can of soup with a spoon, took the spoon out and tasted it, put the spoon back in. A bundle of rags rustled and the shaggy head of a real hobo extended, regarded them, decided not to give a shit, and dropped.
Hiya,
said Sayaka Mickey, the angel.
Are you Sayaka Mickey, the angel?
Said Darien.
What d'ya think? I don't quite have the look, now do I?
None dared enter her tent. They stared from outside, lined in an even row, Darien centered. The witch wondered what kind of response Darien might have to the lackadaisical tone Sayaka Mickey took, but Darien actually knelt and bowed her head.
Your Grace.
Oh yeah. The theology of the law of the cycles had been a big deal back in the Empire. The witch hadn't been there long, but Hedgewish had given her a mound of pamphlets. God and whatnot. The kind of stuff Hemet would sneer at,
delusions to sway the populace.
But Darien stooped. her eyes met the ground. Berwin, after a hesitant moment, lowered to a knee.
I think I can remember your voice, at least,
Berwin said.
You were the one who warned Lady Cicero and Lady Cook about the Archon. I remember it too,
said Darien.
That was a long time ago, wasn't it?
Sayaka Miki lifted a spoonful of soup to her lips, blew, and slurped.
Nice cloak you got there, Leah. Mind if I ask where you got it?
Berwin blinked. She pulled at the corners of her white cape, which she had worn without fail since the witch met her.
I forget exactly. A motel somewhere. They leave those things lying around in motels. Well, I was sharing a room with Administrator Hedgewish at the time. I assumed it was an overlooked leftover from a tryst.
Yush! Sayaka Miki set down her soup can. She wiped her mouth on her sleeve.
Sorry. I wasn't expecting visitors today. So I'm afraid I can't live up to whatever image you expected from an angel, or whatever you think I am. Why don't you guys come in? It's actually pretty spacious. Your Grace, it would be arrogant and unbecoming of mortals such as we two.
Darien faded away mid-sentence, seemingly at loss for words.
Be so close to your presence.
Sayaka Miki shook her head and laughed. She kicked her crummy shoes against the ground and scooped up her soup can.
All right, I'll come out then.
She pushed open the tent flaps and strode into the demi-light, shielding her eyes from the non-sun as she considered either the rooftops or empty sky.
I hope it doesn't make me sound more ominous or all-knowing than I am if I say I actually expected at least some of you to show up one day or another.
Tall, fluid of movement, she loomed above the witch.
Your Grace,
said Darien, still bowing,
our intention is to defeat the evil in Washington and set right the wrongs our empire created. Cube tell you he already sent some guys way tougher than all of you and they got their butts kicked? In the fatal kinda way.
She slurped her soup.
Yes, Your Grace. He tell you I was part of that team? And got my butt kicked? Only difference being I didn't die.
No answer. Berwin smiled.
Is that so, Miss Angel? Yeah, but I wouldn't look so happy about it, Leah. Your pal here's only trying to butter me up with all this Your Grace crap. She thinks having an angel on her side will give her the edge she needs. That right?
Darien finally raised her head.
And you claim you're not all-knowing? Lady Cicero, at least, could never tell. I dunno about that, I think maybe she humored you. You got some obvious tells, Mia. You're in less control of your body than you think. Geez, that sounded really creepy, and to think I was trying to sound wise. Guess I'm no good at this ancient mentor kinda stuff. To be honest, I prefer it that way,
said Darien.
I've had my fill of mentors. And I figure if God does exist, he or she doesn't have to put on airs for the humans. We've strayed from the point,
said Berwin, who rose alongside Darien.
If this woman was your ace, nice of you not to inform me ahead of time. By the way, it appears she's as impotent as us all. Tell us, Miss Angel, how you, got your butt kicked, as you so sagaciously put it.
Sayaka Miki slurped her soup straight from the can and left a brown mustache on her upper lip. She opened her mouth to speak, noticed the stares, and wiped the mustache with a sheepish grin.
Sorry. I picked up some bad eating habits last time I came planetside. I blame it on an old friend. Crappy excuse, I know. Anyway, yeah. Cube had his big ol' plan. I'm sure he calculated flawless odds. He didn't invite me, of course, but I'm not camping out here for no reason, and whatever that miasma does to turn magical girls into witches doesn't work on me, considering I'm part witch already, you could say.
She considered the stares of her audience.
Guess I'm going a little fast for you guys. What's a witch?
Said the witch.
A long story. Let's just say it's what magical girls would turn into if there wasn't the law of the cycles. It's what happens if you touch the miasma. Anyway, story time.
Story time with Sayaka. So Kyubei's corralled this whole huge host of magical girls from all over, different countries and all that. The strongest possible. You would figure he might want someone like me around just to translate, but nah, course not. I also figured he might bring along a few of my old friends, considering they're pretty tough cookies themselves, but no dice there either. We're talking 20-30 total. 5 of them are just there to deal with the miasma, the rest are combat. He's done his homework at least. He knows the magical girl in that miasma he has to worry about isn't Charlie Viscara, it's Christine Luce.
Juliet? Her.
Said Darien.
No. Clown Muffle is far.
My story, buddy? Let me finish. Charlie's tough, I'll give you that, but is she, like, top-tier tough? 99.9 percentile tough? Maybe, but we're talking some serious contenders old Cubes brought in. Nah, Christine Luce is a serious deal. Sure, she might have seemed weak when you knew her, but you realize where she's living, right? A miasma. Probably the most powerful ever. Something like that is generating energy like nobody's business. Christine, Clown Muffle too, but it matters more for Christine, is being charged past her limit. We're talking peak magical girl performance here. So a pretty mediocre memory manipulator has been cranked to a full-scale reality bender. Well, is she really bending reality or is she just bending your brain? Doesn't really matter. But Kyubei's got girls specifically designed to handle that. People who don't need their senses to fight. People with pocket dimensions and anti-magic force fields. Crazy. So while they all stream into the miasma, I tag along in back. I know my target. It's neither of them, Christine or Charlie. I can't vouch for their reasons, but they're magical girls. There's something in that miasma pure evil, and it's my job to root that thing out. So I skipped the big fanfare light show when Kyubei's squad cracked against Charlie and Christine. I went for that Archon.
The Archon isn't that big a deal, though,
said Berwin.
If Juliet dies.
You guys. Seriously, I swear. We can hash out the morals or the pragmatism. You think I'd still be here if I were pragmatic? Christine's not as bad a kid as you think. Maybe that's the part of me that's cycles speaking, but there's no magical girl that doesn't have her reason. No witch either, that's what I've learned. And you know what? Maybe even no Archon or Wraith. Who's to say? But I have to keep myself going somehow. I have to save this world. I went straight to where I figured the Archon would be waiting, the capital. I entered through the front. No security, human kinda security I mean. Also no wraiths. That's the weird thing about the miasma, it's not generating wraiths like it should. I guess it makes witches instead. Anyway, when I get inside. You know who I see? 3 guesses. Guys, come on, that's an invitation to speak, you can speak now.
President DuPage,
said the witch. That's the dullest answer, you think I'd make you guess if that were it?
Lady Cicero,
said Darien, suddenly excited.
The Empress,
said Berwin. Wrong, wrong, wrong. You'll never guess, because I never could have, although in retrospect it makes a ton of sense. After all, have you ever stopped to wonder why Christine and Charlie can live in the miasma without it killing them, when any other magical girl who touches it becomes a witch?
I assumed the Archon controls the miasma somehow not to harm them,
said Berwin. Me too. Turns out there's another explanation. Your old friend Lila Chatterjee. Your little administrator.
Hedgewish.
Bingo. I'll admit I got a little mad.
What the hell are you doing here?
I asked. Then I calmed down, gave her the benefit of the doubt.
Did your new president force you to do this?
She was excited to see me, a nice change. She looked around, she asked me,
where's the others? All the rest? I know she has a lot.
Referring to Madoka, of course. God, crap, I'm gonna get sidetracked if I try too hard on the details. I told her it was just me. Madoka didn't send anyone else. In fact, she didn't really send anyone. I'm going rogue a little here. Her mood went kersplat.
Really? Really? She isn't sending anyone. Tell me about it, I know how you feel. So you're saying God doesn't actually care that the world is in this shape?
Said Darien. That's exactly what she asked, Mia. Thanks for the line reading, although her delivery was a bit more on the disbelieving, than angry, side.
I should have figured,
she said. I'm not a big fan of when people talk bad on Madoka, as you might imagine, so I tried to change the topic, something like,
you don't have to worry. I'm strong enough to kill the Archon. Just tell me where she is.
You wouldn't believe it. I didn't. She shook her head. Her face went from mad as hell to blandly apathetic in a way I didn't care for. She opened that case she always carries with her, and, well, we got in a fight. My butt got kicked. The end. Story time's over.
Administrator Hedgewish,
said Darien, a skeptical eye levied. The witch had to agree with her sentiment. Hedgewish had tried her best on that yacht, but she had no combat abilities whatsoever.
Look, remember what I said about Christine? How she got all powered up from the energy in the miasma. Same for Lila. Except even crazier, because Lila was always operating way below her potential. She had a pretty powerful wish, all things considered, even if her reasons behind it were dumb.
Sayaka turned over her soup cup and no more than a drop plinked onto the pavement. She had sipped from it on occasion during her speech, making a mess on her chin, which she wiped away with a thumb. She dropped the can, kicked it, bounced it like a hacky sack on her heels.
She DVE probably killed me too. But believe it or not, angels have guardian angels too. You there, Isabel? Your radar, you sensing a magical girl 'bout a mile west of here, away from the miasma.
The witch nodded. She had been aware of this singular presence for a while, assumed it a local girl.
That's my partner. Nagisa Momoe. She got sent down with me and she refuses to go back until I do. We finally got in enough arguments that she's not too keen on hanging around me, but she's always watching. I gave her the slip last time with the old cheese on a mousetrap trick. Held her up long enough until she could swoop in at the nick of time and save me.
She missed the can, either on purpose or accident, and it clattered to the ground.
So, here's the deal. Lila kicked my butt last time, but I've had a while to mull things over and I know just how to beat her. And if I can beat her I can beat El Presidente. I've got two major problems, and that's where you guys come in. I'm in charge now, by the way. I dunno what toy soldiers you all were playing at before, but I guarantee I can beat any or all of you silly in a fight, so don't try me. Tell me your plan and I'll decide if I like it,
said Darien.
You three distract Nagisa. Get her out of my hair and this world's good as fixed. What'd ya say?
Her constant stream of speech, which streamed even when she did not speak, ended. Her animation skidded to a halt in accompaniment. The entire time she had alternated between skipping back and forth, spinning an heel, dribbling soup down her gullet, bending her back as far as it would go, rolling her head on her shoulders. She fell still and her clothes around her fell still a moment afterward. The eyes of Berwin and the witch were allowed to turn to Darien. Darien remained focused on Sayaka.
You want us to be a distraction, not even for an enemy, but an angel who won't even kill us. I'm sure you like that, Berwin. Something nice and safe.
Berwin tugged the edges of her cape around herself.
Actually, I find this utterly absurd. I can't believe it. A babushka doll of absurdity. First Lady Cicero opened up, she trusted nobody but herself, flung herself at Clown Muffle all alone, despite whatever she preached before of fellowship and unity. Then Darien too decided, I shall stand alone, hoist the weight of the world onto my shoulders. And were that not absurd enough, my poppets, we've reached the final gate, and Darien has opened, and here we find Miss Angel, Miss God's Herald, and here she is, espousing this exact same lone wolfism. I cannot believe it. I cannot.
She did not rile herself up. Her voice never exceeded a level tone. She maintained a smile as though she provided sound advice. The witch looked at her, processed her words, and thought. There was another doll, larger than all the rest, with the exact same mentality. That doll with the top hat and white tuxedo.
She provides no particulars,
added Berwin after a pause.
Simply, I'll make it happen. With my force of will the world will work the way I want it. If only it were that simple. How much different this world would be if only we could will its existence the way we liked. Pa. I'm insulted. None of us trust one another. We trust only ourselves. It's the same as it ever was. The way Kyubei likes it,
said the witch. She remembered a conversation she once had, long ago, in a diner in the frigid north, seated across that largest doll herself. Sayaka Miki span with a mercurial glimmer. She terminated in a shrug.
You're absolutely right. It's true. I can't deny it. But it's not as though you guys can do anything about it. You've got no way to enter the miasma, do you? Maybe if you fly around on Isabel's broomstick, but that won't get you into the places you need to be. The incubator told us you could provide a way to enter the miasma unscathed,
said Darien.
He did,
said Sayaka Miki, rolling the discarded soup can atop her foot like a soccer player and knocking it skyward so she could catch it.
I can go in myself, but it's not like I know a way for you guys to do it.
Oh no, said a familiar voice. They did the usual look around, except Sayaka Miki, who acted as though she heard nothing as she balanced the kin on her head. I apologize if my words misled you. I never insinuated that Sayaka Miki was the magical girl who might possess the power to bring you inside the miasma.
Classy as always, Cube.
The soup can dropped, she caught it.
You ought to know when you use big words and complicated sentences you confuse us dumb humans.
Your facetiousness misses the mark, Miss Miki, considering you hardly qualify now as human. Anyway, the promised assistance will arrive shortly. Miss Leva, you should detect her and her assistant's approach within a few minutes.
Are we allowed to know the identity of this help?
Said Berwin.
Some girl from faraway lands, perhaps? Even a name would reassure, if that name were meaningless. Perhaps this rhizomatic cockiness about our intentions all stems from you, Sir Incubator.
Unfortunately, this person's identity is not meaningless to you, which is why I withheld it. I assumed that if you knew it, you would have less faith in her ability to help you, but I assure you that I am over 70% confident she can bring you into the miasma, by far the best odds given our current timetable. Berwin nodded, then pantomimed blowing her brains out with a pistol. But, as she'll arrive soon, and you've already reached your destination, I suppose there's no longer any harm in revealing her identity. And at that moment the signatures burst onto the radar. 1, 2, 3, 4, arranged in a pattern that indicated they rode in a vehicle. The signature felt familiar to her, though. She couldn't always tell signatures apart, or attach specific signatures to specific people, but these signatures, 3 of them, at least, stood out to her, and always had, because they were subtly different from everyone else's, a changed timbre, something unnerving in the background. The same distinctness she had felt with the handmaiden. Like something about them was a little subhuman, incomplete, partial. Artificial. They were those secretaries. The ones in the doctor's office. And the 4th signature, the relatively ordinary one, had to be. The witch had long forgotten her name. But Kyubei remembered every name, and so he said it. Dr. Siu Cho. End of chapter. Chapter end.